I didn't know this came with a history lesson. Jake's voice carried a hint of boredom as he glanced around the silent cemetery. It matters. Aiden didn't even look back. If you want to understand why the path works, you have to understand the people who came before us. Excitement crept into his voice despite the cold surrounding them. Don't worry. She's the least interesting part. He smiled faintly and continued deeper into the graveyard. The next monument towered over the others. A weathered stone statue stood proudly above the grave, its features softened by decades of rain. The man wore elegant clothing. One hand rested over his chest. The other pointed toward the town beyond the cemetery walls. Even under the pale moonlight, his face somehow felt arrogant. This is Thomas S. Valarii. Aiden stopped beneath the statue. Everyone says he founded the town. They named almost everything after him. But that's not the whole story. Jake folded his arms. Aiden continued. After Adelia died, Thomas became mayor. His flashlight swept across the statue's cold face. But people whispered that he murdered her. The words seemed strangely loud in the silence. Adelia was loved. Everyone wanted her to become the town's first mayor. But back then, people weren't willing to accept a woman in power. Jake remained silent. Aiden lowered his voice. Not long after people started talking about making her mayor, she became sick. No one saw her again. And then, she died. The wind stirred softly between the graves. Her family blamed Thomas. They refused to bury her beside him. So now, Aiden pointed back into the darkness behind them.
He's here. And she's alone. For a long moment, neither boy spoke. Eventually, people stopped asking questions. They stopped saying her name. And little by little, the town forgot the woman who actually built it. Jake looked back toward the distant monument hidden behind rows of gravestones. He'd lived in this town his entire life. Every road, every school, every building, all carried the name Valarii. Thomas Valarii. He could barely remember hearing the name Adelia more than once or twice. Strange. How easily history could be buried. Now, Aiden's grin returned. This is where things get interesting. He led Jake away from the larger monuments and into the forgotten corner of the cemetery. The gravel path disappeared. So did the lanterns. Only uneven ground remained beneath their feet. Here, there were no grand statues. No flowers. No names. Only dozens. Then hundreds. Of small stones half swallowed by the earth. Most had no writing at all. Aiden counted each grave beneath his breath. Quietly. Carefully. As though skipping even one would matter. Finally, he stopped. This one. The marker looked identical to every other forgotten stone surrounding it. We have to step over it. Without hesitation, Aiden lifted his foot and crossed. Then he waited. Jake frowned. That's it. He glanced down at the tiny stone before casually stepping over it himself. What makes this one so special? Aiden didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared into the forest beyond the cemetery fence. The Valaries founded the town. But they weren't the first people living here. There was another group. They lived in the woods. No one really knew who they were. They weren't part of any nearby tribe. They didn't belong anywhere. They simply existed. Jake felt the night grow colder. Some people believed they were just strange hermits. Others, Aiden smiled uneasily, said they weren't entirely human. My grandma used to call them the fair folk. He gave a small shrug. I don't know if I believe that. His voice suggested he wasn't entirely sure anymore. Adelia was friends with them. But after she died, everything changed. The townspeople rounded them up. They locked them inside the hospital. He paused. Back then, it wasn't a hospital. It was an asylum. Jake's stomach tightened. The town thought they were witches. Or possessed. My grandma insisted they were fairies. Whatever they really were. Aiden looked down at the nameless graves surrounding them. People believed they carried magic. And they believed this land belonged to them first. The silence stretched. So they tortured them. They tortured every last one of them. Until they died. Even the wind seemed to disappear. Their bodies were buried here. No names. No families. No memorials. Only dirt. Aiden gently nudged the small stone with the toe of his boot. This grave belongs to their elder. They called her Old Raven. The name lingered in the darkness long after he finished speaking. Without another word, Aiden turned toward the rusted fence at the back of the cemetery and started walking. Jake remained where he was for a moment. I don't understand. His voice sounded far less confident than before. How did Casey learn all this? None of it sounded like the kind of story children made up. It sounded remembered. Aiden shrugged. Probably the same way I did. Some of it's written on the back of the map. The rest, I asked the old people in town. I searched the library. And I think Casey copied his map from someone else's. He reached into his pocket and lightly tapped the folded map. I made another copy. I left it in my room. I don't know why. He stared at the weathered paper for a moment longer. It just felt like something that shouldn't disappear. Jake looked at the map. Then back toward the nameless grave. For the first time that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that every step they had taken had already been taken before.